everyone. I hope you guys are having an absolutely phenomenal Monday today. All right, we're gonna have a lot to get through. So you guys know right now we just moved into two things. Welcome to the month of April and welcome to the second quarter of the year. With that being said, as we go through the numbers today for LA, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties, one thing that I want you to note on these, they have not fully updated all of the numbers. So the graphs you're gonna see go through February. The March graph has not been released yet. Obviously, we just ended the week last week, so that will probably come out within the following week. So we'll review February as it compares to March next week. Right now, what we're gonna be looking at is this initial week in the month of April, kind of where we are to start here on the, what is it, the fourth day of the month, right? With that being said, I'm going to go through the slides today a little bit quicker. So if you want to go a little bit more in depth, we'll probably do more of that from last session. There's a lot more that I want to go over today in the way of legislative updates. So there's some key things that happened in the last week as it relates to a couple things. We're going to talk about a couple assembly bills that need to be on your radar that were introduced, a bill that was signed into law last week. And then we also have there is a constitutional amendment that was submitted that we need to look at. So there's a couple things. There's a lot of things that happened in the last week. And you guys know that I like to make sure that we cover those legislative updates because of the impact that it has on our industry and to encourage you, again, to get involved in that legislative process. And because these bills are that important, my friends. So we're going to jump right in to that as well. So it's going to be a lot that we cover this morning, but bear with me on it when we get to the industry updates. We're also going to be talking about a new introduction for us in the office on a new lead gen program that we are running, my friends. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into our weekly industry update. Oh, I froze for a second. All right, my friends, we are always going to start with the TCPA. As I share every single week, please, whatever list you are calling, make sure they are scrubbed. If you have any questions about this, Ed Bonilla can definitely guide you. And we are always helpful. We are always more than willing to work with you on that process. Mission moment, as I've been mentioning week after week, we're going to keep this up here, my friends, for a while. But we want to make sure that if you feel compelled to share to efforts in the Ukraine, that you buy a shirt on KW Red Label for KW Home from KW Worldwide. These funds are going directly to Keller Williams Worldwide to help with those that are assisting with refugees out of the Ukraine in our surrounding Keller Williams countries that we have in that area. So this is a great opportunity to support for those that feel so compelled. All right, jumping right in to LA County, my friends. Again, I want to note, when we look at the graphs, we've got January, we've got February. The March graphs have not yet been released. We will review those next week. This is why we're not going to spend too much time on the numbers today, because we're looking at a very small period here, the first through the third, right? Compared to the first through the third, still going to give us an indicator. A couple things that I want to note here as we look at this, right? Obviously, the first through the third, we're considering one day Friday, because some of the information will be updated from Saturday and Sunday, but a lot of it gets updated on Mondays. So with that being said, there is still an impact when we see an increase at any point considering the last month. We also know that coming out of February to March, right, which is what we're going to be comparing next week, we're going to see some things that are impacted by the fact that March is simply a longer month than February. So we always want to inspect what we're expecting. I invite you to kind of raise questions as we look through the numbers and not just make those assumptions, right? We're coming out, the first was Friday, we've got a Saturday and a Sunday, and now we're hitting Monday. So these numbers, while we are going to look at them, we take them with a grain of salt until we have a little bit more time frame to kind of compare them to. All right. So Los Angeles County sales trends from last month, we're seeing a slight increase of 6.2%. Still a big decrease from this same time last year of 23.3%. We look at properties sold. This is a big decrease. Now, again, right, take it with a grain of salt because we're in that first couple days and we experience a weekend. So that tends to happen is what happens. We're noting the number of properties sold is down, and yet we know that title doesn't get recorded on the weekends, right? So just keep this piece in mind here. There is a decline of 74.5%. While this probably has gone down, it's probably not as severe as this, and we'll see that next week. Same thing considering last year, down 73.8%. Looking at our inventory trends. Now, our inventory trends overall, we have kind of seen this trend that was occurring. We talked about this last week, and we're going to continue talking about this. We know, especially here, this is across the nation, and especially here from we've been seeing, there have been significant inventory challenges. We know that generally in the first quarter of the year, typically we've seen with accordance with seasonality, right? Traditional seasonality tends to dictate that in the first and fourth quarter of the year, there is a decline of real estate activity. In the second and third quarter of the year, we didn't see a major increase in real estate activity. The last 2 years, because of the pandemic, took us out of normal seasonality. So seasonality in the last 2 years has not been consistent with the previous decade, right? Because what happens? Market shifts due to national pandemic, market actually got shut down. And then we saw a release of pent-up demand. We had the Federal Reserve getting involved in impacting or attempting to stimulate the market through rate changes, et cetera. And we saw a lot of that happening. So we saw skewed seasonality. With that being said, as we entered in last year, right, we saw December, January, February, and an increase in March. And we saw a slight dip here in April. This is much lower. So while we did see a slight increase in December, inventory is much, much lower here in Los Angeles County. So we are seeing a decline, right? Number of new listings down 71.7% from last month for those 3 days, right? Just 3 days. Down 65.5% from this same time a year ago. We look at the number of properties pended, down a little less than 70%. Again, we're looking at a 3-day period, so take that with a grain of salt. But from last year, down 61.4%. Now, with that being said, we are going to talk about this when we get over to some of the legislative updates, some of the legislation that is being introduced right now as it relates to a couple different assembly bills that are coming on the table, as well as a constitutional amendment that was proposed last week, right? These impacts are things that are coming to play because of some of the challenges that we are having with inventory, not just in California, but nationally. NAR estimated that at the end of 2021, right, inventory was down 20% from the previous year, from 2020, and down 60% from 2019. We continue to see this impact of underbuilding that has occurred, of increase in population that has occurred. And so this is going to be a really important kind of conversation that we continue to have. All right, with our pricing trends, an average active price decline that was pretty consistent with what we saw last week. Average active price down 3.9. We know here the numbers that we really want to pay attention to month over month, our average active price, and then year over year, our average sold price. Having a conversation with homeowners in any of these areas, right? The average sold price is what I'm paying attention to. We know when we have a conversation with somebody, we want to institute or create curiosity. And we do that by saying something along the lines of, hey, did you know that the average sold price in your area has gone up by 24.4% from this same time a year ago? Just out of curiosity, do you know the value of your home? Would you like to? Would you be offended if I prepared a market analysis for you? Right? That, remember, these are little elements of script that are not in most script books, and a couple key pieces on there that I just want to dig into, right? Is, did you know, just out of curiosity, did you know right? Just out of curiosity is very disarming. This is from a book called Exactly What to Say that I know I've recommended it before. I highly recommend it for how we kind of get into conversation that is a little bit less aggressive, right? It kind of gets behind somebody's defenses. Is just out of curiosity, did you know? And then would you be offended if, right? Or just out of curiosity, would you like to know the value of your home? Would you be offended if? Right? Most people are not going to say, I would absolutely be offended, right? They're going to have that conversation with you. So this is how we create conversation, is with this number here. As you get deeper into conversation, the average active price experiencing a decline is definitely a way to create more urgency, right? How long are they going to wait to take advantage of the value that they've gained in their home over the last year, the equity that they've gained? All right, absorption rates. Now here we're seeing an increase, right? So we see, again, we're looking at 3 days. So we're going to take this with a grain of salt. And yet, to go from 0.7 to 2.9, this is going to be something we want to monitor. It does not move us out of the current market that we're in. So we know by traditional standards, a seller's market is defined by 1 to 5 months of inventory. 5 to 7 is considered a balanced market, and 7+ months of inventory has long been considered a buyer's market. With that being said, that doesn't mean that one market is necessarily better than the other. It's more of a supply and demand challenge here. There are buyers in both markets, but the type of buyer sometimes changes. There are sellers in both markets, but again, the type of seller sometimes changes. This is a big jump. We've stayed around the 1.1, 1.2. We've been below 1 month of inventory for a while now, for the past couple of weeks. So to hit about a 2.9, we're going to take it with a grain of salt, because again, we're looking at a weekend, which could just mean that some of the inventory that's moved has not been recorded yet. And yet we're going to monitor this, right? We're going to monitor this over the next couple of weeks and keep an eye on this months of inventory number. And then days on market and sold versus list, slight decrease in days on market, no major change here. Sold versus original list price at 103%. We ended February at about 102%. We're probably around that in March, and as we come into April, being at 103% here. But remember, the average active price, right? The average active price has declined. So when we look at sold versus original list price, and then we look at our average active price, remember that those play hand in hand, because the average active price now will impact that average sold and original list price later. At 103%, we still have homes selling over asking, but we know, just based on conversations that we had with each of you, we've got a couple things going on. We've had one, less counters. Not that there's not still counters, just less counters. Maybe instead of 35 counter offers, maybe, or additional offers on a property, maybe there's 10. Right? Maybe there's 5. We have seen the return of a non-multiple counter offer, right? We've been dealing with multiple counter offers for a while. I invite you, if you're getting just a counter offer on a property, make sure you understand how that changes, right? The parameters of your client's contractual obligation when they sign off on it, as well as the same thing on your seller. If you are only doing 1 counter, right, how does that interaction change on the contract? So we have seen those be reintroduced. We've seen it come up, right? So just to note. All right, Orange County. Looking again, number of properties for sale, an increase 19.5% in just those 3 days. Number of properties sold, right, from last month, down 76.5% in those 3 days. We look at current versus the same time a year ago. Number of properties for sale, we know this has been down across the board, down 30.4%. Number of properties sold, down 82.4%. We look at the number of new listings. Again, we're seeing a decline, and yet we're going to take this with a grain of salt until next week, because again, we're looking at a 3-day period. We're not looking at a longer week, and we're looking at a 3-day period in which 2 of those days were weekend days, right? We're weekend days. We may actually see more come on the market here on Monday, right, than we would on Saturday and Sunday. Everybody starts getting all their contracts in from the weekend right here. All right, so down 78.9% from last year. Yes, we are experiencing a significant decrease, 77.6%. We look at the number of properties pended month over month, down 84.4%. Year to date from last year, down 80.1%. Pricing trends, similar trend here that we've been seeing. This decline up here in our average active price of 3.4%. Average sold price from last year, 19.6%. Just out of curiosity, do you know that the average sold price in your area has gone up by 19.6%? Do you know the value of your home? Would you like to? Right? This is the number we're talking about. All right, our absorption rates, again, an increase, right? Up to 2.4%. We'll monitor it to see if this kind of sticks too, but my guess is this is also having a bit to play into with a weekend number. A lot of stuff that goes on over the weekend probably has not been recorded yet. And then last but not least, days on market and sold versus original list price, a decline in days on market of 33.3%. Sold versus original list price, look at this jump, 98 to 104%. We ended February at 103% from sold versus original list price. The beginning of March was at about 98%. We're seeing this jump at about 104%. From looking at this the last couple of weeks, we've definitely seen this sold versus original list price be a bit higher in Orange County. Orange County was one of the areas that we experienced the highest change upwards in sold in the sold price compared to last year. The reason I bring this up is we are in a higher price point county, and when we look at market shift, right? When we look at market shift, traditionally, and this is the reason that I bring this up is because we're feeling a lot of micro shifts on the market right now, right? Offers that were at 35, 40 offers now being 10, 15 offers, seeing changes in having seller multiple counter offers to just having a seller counter offer, appraisal challenges that have gone on, all the inventory issues, rate changes, et cetera, all these things that kind of come into play. Traditionally, when we experience a market shift, one of the things that we have taken note of is that luxury tends to experience, or higher price points tend to experience, a hit or the decline first, right? Before we start feeling it in some of the more affordable markets. However, in this last couple of years, because of things that have come in the market, what we have also seen happen is that affordability gap has increased. And so we're actually seeing here the supply and demand in counties like Orange County that are a higher price point county that then impact this sold versus original list price, because we know that price is impacted by demand, right? The more demand there is and less supply, that puts upward pressure on price. That's just basic economics. But when we look at, this being a higher price point market and not necessarily experiencing some of the same shifts that we're seeing in some of the other markets, I encourage you to think about the impact of the last 2 years a little bit differently, right? How the affordability gap changes things. Why the shifts that we might see, these micro shifts that we might experience in this market, are not going to look the same as they looked the last time, right? And yet, does that mean that there's not necessarily a shift happening just because the shift is different, right? So I just want to bring that up because this is a pretty significant jump here. Again, I always will say, and you guys hear me repeat it all the time, we always want to inspect what we're expecting. So looking at the time frame here, this will be something that we continue to monitor. And yet this is something that we saw in the last 2 weeks when we looked at Orange County specifically. All right, jumping on over to Riverside County, right? We see our number of properties for sale, slight jump here, 7.5%. Number of properties sold, again, right? Things are not being recorded over the weekend. So we may see this transition a little bit, but my estimate would probably be that it's still lower. It just might not be this significant amount here of 85.5%. From this same time a year ago, number of properties for sales, we started entering these lower price counties have actually gone up, and the number of properties sold has gone down. We look at our inventory trends, similar to what we're experiencing in all the counties. I want you guys to see this dip that's happening right here of new listings coming on the market, down from last month, from this small time period, 77.3%, down last year, 71.7%. Number of properties pended, down this month from 74.6%, down from last year's 65.8% for that 3-day period. Looking at our pricing trends, we're actually in Riverside County, we're seeing a little bit of an increase in price. We've seen a little bit of that fluctuation. So from January to February, we saw a little bit of an increase. Next week, we'll be able to review what happened here in March. But this is a 3% increase in average active price. Look at this number right over here, this average sold price. This is one of the biggest jumps. We know that nationally, right, at the end of the year, this is about 14% across the board. 34% is very, very high, right? This is incredibly high from the same time period last year. Now, with that being said, we're looking at less properties, right? So let's come back over here. Here we go. So the number of properties sold, we're looking at less properties is where we're getting this number from. So with that being said, this number being as high as it is and seeing this big of an impact could be an anomaly that evens out once we have a bigger spread, because it's taking the average, right? So again, we always want to inspect what we're expecting. But with that being said, this is a pretty significant number that we'll want to monitor over the course of this next week or two. And absorption rates across the board, this number has gone up. We are looking at a 3-day period. So again, we're taking this with a grain of salt. But these type of jumps being as significant as they are, it is going to be something to monitor. And then days on market, right, slight increase. Also, we're taking into account 2 weekend days sold versus original list price, an increase here as well from 93 to 100. I can tell you this, we definitely did not end March as low as this, right? We definitely did not end March as low as this, just based on some of the numbers, but just from this spread that we're seeing as we start the month, we do have a significant spread, and this has been kind of a trend across the board here. Okay, last county, and then we're going to jump into legislation. We're going to spend some time on legislation today because I'm telling you guys right now, these bills are very important. Okay, sales trends, number of properties for sale from this same little time period last month, up 14.1%. From last year, up 20.7%. We look at the number of properties sold, a decline. Again, things are not getting recorded over the weekend, right? And a decline from last year. We're looking at our inventory trends. Now, across the board, despite things not getting recorded over the weekend, we are already seeing this be a downward trend from what we saw a year ago. So it's likely that these numbers we're going to stay in the red, right? It's not even likely. I can tell you right now, we've stayed in the red on the number of new listings, down 70.9% from this same time a month ago, down 57.6% from the same time a year ago. Same thing, we're seeing these declines with number of properties pended across the board. Pricing trends, another increase. So interesting that in our lower price point counties, we're seeing average active price be in the green, and these average sold prices being so significant, 23.4% from this same time a year ago. Again, we're looking at a smaller number of properties that are being considered for this spread. So we will continue to monitor this over the next week. And again, this month's inventory closed sales for that time period, another big jump. I don't think this number is going to stay as significantly high as it has in all 4 counties, because again, we take that with a grain of salt. We're looking at the 1st through the 3rd, which includes 2 weekend days. So we are seeing sales that have not necessarily been recorded yet. We will have a more clear picture next Monday on where we really are with this number, but it does look like we're seeing some increases. And then last but not least, For this county, our days on market decline, and sold versus original list price, another jump. So we're seeing average active price fluctuations, and then sold versus original list, another jump. Okay. A couple things I want to announce as we kind of move on in. We're gonna go quick on this. I want to talk about the future of floor time. On Friday at 9 a.m., right? On Friday at 9 a.m., we are gonna have a session here at the, oh, give me 1 second, because I think, so I'm gonna know, Ken, that's a great question. And we would have to have all the data on what we're looking at for we're looking at a bigger spread, right, on property. So that's a good question on why not use price per square footage. A lot of the data sources that we use, they're not necessarily, we can always add that as a metric if they provide it, but that's not a metric that they're using, right? When we're doing property, now that's going to change on the type of property, but when we look at how an appraiser appraises property, which I think is one of the important factors for us to have an understanding of, and this is going to be a great, for those that are doing the 6-figure plus program, I don't think it's this week. I think either in 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to have Pavan Madi doing a session on how he prices property, right? In the style of an appraiser. So it's a little bit different. When we look at how an appraiser is looking at property, they're taking a couple things into consideration in how they do their comparables. They're looking at properties that are within 1 mile, give or take any major changes to that. So within the same zip code, right, is going to be one element of that. If there's a major freeway, right, that's going to affect that. Major streets, major changes, school district changes, etc. But generally within that 1 mile period. They're looking at square footage difference of approximately 15% in both the lot size as well as the size of the property. And then they're looking at it being a more recent sale. Now, with that being said, they are then doing adjustments on the basis of things like, how do I put it, like another bedroom, right? Or another bathroom. And they're doing adjustments based on condition of the property. So that's generally how we look at pricing overall. When we look at price of comparables that are in the area, or we're looking at price like this, we're looking at an average price point across the board, notwithstanding, condition, notwithstanding style of home. Using price per square footage is going to change things because this is going to include all types of residential sales, which includes condos, right? And we can't get a clear look at price per square footage on lot size for a condo as we can for residential. So that's why the average price point that we're looking at is to give us a little bit more of an idea of the trends. But I do highly encourage, if there's more curiosity around that, the pricing class or CMA class that Pavan is going to be doing, highly, highly, highly recommend it, my friends. But that was a great question. All right, we're going to talk about the future of floor time. Floor time, right? So I'm going to share a story on this before we kind of jump into it. When I got into the industry, when I got into real estate, right, I did not really understand this concept of floor time. I would see in these different questions, right? We look at interviews online. It was the questions you should ask a brokerage. And it was this idea of, well, ask them if they have floor time, right? Ask them if they have floor time. Floor time is very reminiscent of a time in real estate where there was less, so to give you some history on real estate, before we had the multiple listing service, brokerages had something called a listing book, right? And so you were very tied to doing real estate in a particular area because you had the listings for your area in the listing book. If a client wanted to see a property, they had to come in to the brokerage and the agent would have to look up those listings in the listing book to know what was available. Somebody took a page out of the listing book, nobody knew what listing was there, right? This is how real estate was done back in the day. With the introduction of the multiple listing service, it created this ability for not only us as agents to data share, to be able to actually work in farther areas. It also gave the consumer more access to see properties anywhere without having to walk into a brokerage to see a property. With that being said, Before, right, if you have to come to see something at an office, if you have to actually talk to a real estate agent in order to see any type of property, well, what did the real estate offices get a lot of? They got a lot of walk-in or call-in traffic. And so the concept behind floor time was that an agent would be on duty, right, would be an agent on duty, so that if there was a walk-in or there was a call-in, they had the potential to get that client lead. Similar to some of these older forms of lead generation, the amount of traffic from something like floor time has decreased, I mean, significantly, right? Even within our office, do we get call-ins sometimes? Yes, but the majority of those call-ins say something along the lines of, well, I read about this agent's review, or I'm calling about this specific listing and I want to talk to X agent. The amount of people that call in to ask for an agent by name gone up significantly. The amount of people that call in to say, hey, I just want to talk to an agent, it's not high enough to warrant an agent spending an hour, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours of their time on the off chance that maybe I'll get a lead, right? That maybe I'll get something coming in. Now, we've been looking a lot at how has the industry changed. Now we have websites like Zillow and all these online lead and data aggregators that provide leads. Over the years, we have studied a lot of these different programs. And those of you that have known me for a while know that I'm hyper analytical and that I want to know what the return on investment is going to be. And before we're investing in something, we want to make sure that we're not wasting your time, we're not wasting our time. With that being said, we are beta testing a new program that is going to be, we are calling it the future of floor time. This is going to be a hyper, so because we're in beta testing mode right now, we are going to start off with looking for those of you that are interested in participating in this program. There are going to be some requirements and you will be working very closely with me, right? So I'm going to say that off the bat. That may not be the long term, but at least for now, I'm going to be really hyper managing this group so that we can get the best results possible for it. We want to extend it out. What it is that I do not want to just give you an online lead, right? We have looked into online leads for years. With online leads, the rate of conversion, this has been studied, right? The rate of conversion is for every 100 leads, there's 1 conversion. This changes based on how much experience an agent has, how good the scripts are, the quality of the leads, et cetera. And what we know is that sites like Zillow, right? Sites like Opcity, sites like Ojo, all of these different lead providers, they work on the basis of data. So they are tracking things as simple as how quickly does an agent answer the phone? How many conversations does it take for an agent to convert a client? Online leads being 100 to 1 is the average, right? This is the average that has been studied by some of the top agents in lead conversion. The challenge is not in getting the leads. The challenge is in the nurturing and the conversion. And what has also been studied is the average amount of times that an agent will call a lead back. It's less than 2 times before the agent says, this is on average, right? Say it says, hey, I don't think this is a great quality lead. Okay, so we've been looking into how do we use not just online lead generation, but how do we utilize the power of data, right? As well as nurturing to create higher quality potential leads. So I am a big believer that there's 3 tiers. There's a lead, which is somebody that we have earned the right to a one-way conversation. Now, a lead is not something that I consider sure potential business, right? The probability of a lead converting 100 to 1 online lead, right? What we wanted to do is figure out a way that rather than a lead, we could provide warm referrals. What does that mean? We are going to be launching a beta test of a program. It is highly intensive. So I'm telling you now, there's going to be a lot to it. And we'll be talking about this a little bit more in depth on how it's going to work on Friday at 9 in person with me. So you need to message me directly because if you'd like to come to that session, right? But with that being said, This is a warm referral program, meaning when you answer, it is a warm lead being handed off by another party, not a online lead alert, right? It is an actual live person on the other end of the phone. Now, it is still the job of the agent to then convert that, but we're getting from just lead providing to warm referrals. We're doing the nurturing part for you. So we're going to be starting this very soon. If you are interested in participating in our future floor time, there are certain requirements, and every 30 days, we will be adding a new individuals to the program, right? We have the Smart with a Small group. This has to do with the data algorithms. They're very, how do I put it? Something as simple as a lead provider, they change and say, hey, we got a certain lead of this time. We need to all of a sudden pivot exactly what we do. We need to be doing that with a small group so that we can, it increases the quality of the leads when we keep the score of the account high, right? There's a lot of complexity to that. I'll talk a little bit more about it next week on Friday, but I wanted to introduce it for those that are interested. If you are, please contact me directly for this, right? Okay, moving on. Do the database too. For those that are on your next numbers, we are on week 13. Okay, legislation. We got a lot to talk about here. Assembly Bill 2179. Assembly Bill 2179. A couple things here. So we know that right now Governor Newsom is on vacation, which means the acting governor is Eleni Kounalakis, right? There was a bill, AB 2179, that was introduced because March 31st, so a couple days ago, was the deadline for a phase on the Eviction Protections Act, right? The COVID-19 Tenant Protections Act. Assembly members Tim Grayson and Buffy Wicks, they basically created a bill that extended protections through June 30th, 2022, right? For those that applied to the local renter assistance program. The rental assistance program expired at basically midnight on March 31st. This bill was signed in by Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis. This is now extended for those. So basically the way this works, the basics of this bill is that those that submitted or applied for rental assistance by March 31st are shielded from eviction. So I want to note, because this adds a little bit onto the COVID-19 Eviction Protection Act, this adds a different layer. If they applied, not if they were granted it, right? If they applied, they are shielded from eviction for now. One notable thing, so this is more just a historical note, Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis signing this eviction measure has now become the first woman in California history to sign a bill into law. So just to share that, that's more of a historical thing than anything else. All right, AB 1771, right? This is a huge bill. We talked about this a little bit last week. This bill was introduced by California Assembly Member Chris Ward. Should this pass, there's a couple things that this bill does. Now I'm gonna note, this would create a tax on the sale of a home in the first 7 years after purchase. If it is within 3 years, now these are for investors' net capital gains. So this is considered for those that are wanting, the reason this bill is proposed is they're saying, hey, we want to de-incentivize these investors from coming into the market. And so if they sell, right, in a short-term sale, so three years after, the tax is 25%. They sell within 7 years, there is also a tax. Now, two sides of the bill. This is being proposed because they're saying, well, we want to penalize investors that are pricing out regular homeowners from buying property. On the other hand, what if somebody decides to move, right? This is going to be a very interesting bill. There's a lot of argument on both sides right now, but then they would be penalized for moving within that period of time. 7 years, I will tell you this, I had a client that bought in 2018 and they sold in 2021. right? Now, would that be an impact that they would have? There's a lot of moving parts to this bill that we're looking at here. With that being said, CAR specifically, so the California Association of Realtors, is strongly opposing this bill. It's up to you to go do your research on it and see how you feel on this bill based on what is shared on it. But I highly recommend that you go and look up this particular bill. Next bill, AB 2170. This is a CAR sponsored bill. It was introduced by Assembly Member Tim Grayson. What this bill would do is, as of right now, we know that there's going to potentially be properties that get foreclosed on. Will the foreclosures be anything like it was following 2007, 2008? I'm gonna tell you right now, the answer is no. Over 10 million homes went into foreclosure following that market, right? That market shift, that market crash. Over 10 million homes. There are less than 1 million homes that are in active forbearance right now. So we're not talking about foreclosures at the same level that we saw back in 08, right? In terms of following that market shift. With that being said, we still do see foreclosures. There are a good amount of properties that are still in forbearance and all of these things that are going on. What this bill would do is that should Fannie, Freddie, or other GSEs, government-sponsored entities, have a surplus of foreclosure homes, right? They have all these foreclosures. It would not allow them to sell those homes. So we talked about this with Zillow. You guys remember this is like a couple months ago now, right? Last year, when Zillow as an entity, so this is for government-sponsored entities, not companies like Zillow. Zillow is not government-sponsored, okay? But I want to share the difference. When Zillow decided that they were going to close down their iBuyer segment, they had a group of properties that they needed to offload, right? This big bulk of properties. And I told you at that point, there's two ways that they will do it. They're either going to bulk sell to an institutional investor, meaning, let's say I'm selling 1,000 homes to one investor, right? Or they're going to introduce them to market, okay? So what this bill is talking about, AB 2170, is it's saying a government entity has a bulk group of homes from foreclosures, right? That they would not, if this bill was passed, that they would not be able to sell those homes in bulk to an institutional investor. It would also ask them to, if they were putting home on market, that they would respond to offers from 2 potential homeowners for the first 30 days prior to considering investors. What are the parameters of that? There's different things around it, right? But CAR is sponsoring this bill because they feel that by limiting the ability for institutional investors to purchase homes in bulk, that these homes will then be available for your regular homeowner. So that's what AB 2170 is proposing. There is also a constitutional amendment, ACA 14, that was introduced last week. What is that, last week, a week ago, a week and a half ago, on March 26th by Assembly Member Buffy Wicks. Who also submitted the AB 2179, extending statewide eviction protections, right? This bill, or this not bill, this is an amendment, would create an account that 5% of general fund tax revenue would be transferred into for up to 10 years to address housing and homelessness. The idea behind this particular bill is to create a bigger fund, right? A bigger fund for housing funding that would go towards things like elements of homelessness, but also to build more affordable housing. Where the money is going to come from is a different story, right? So again, I encourage you to look into this bill. This is a new bill. See it from my understanding as of today, right? As of today, and this may just, I could maybe have seen it yet, but this is a pretty new bill or new amendment. CAR or NAR has not necessarily made that I have seen, so a statement on this particular bill just yet. So I just wanted to share that with you. There are a couple other bills that I just want to bring up. None of these are going to be ones that we're going to go into too much today. There was AB 2166 that would devote about 30% of federal funds to homeownership. There's Senate Bill 852, which has to do with creation of climate resilient districts. This is going to be on property tax. There is, so again, we talked about 2170 on these bundled sales already. There's some that are going to be really interesting in terms of the rental market. Two of those being AB 2203, which would prohibit using credit histories, right, for certain renters. And then also there is another one, which is AB 2527, which would ban the use of credit report for residential leases. So there's a couple different bills that we're going to be monitoring. We're going to be watching. These were the four that I think are most relevant for you guys right now, and that I would really pay attention to. There are some other ones like where they're going to require AC. I think that was AB 2597, which would require cooling or, basically air conditioning, cooling units in all dwellings. So there's a lot of different bills that are on the table right now. We know last year, 31 housing bills were signed into legislation, right? We want to pay attention to this legislation. The other thing that is impacting this right now, we are going to see a lot of movement, right? We're going to see a lot of stuff happening this year as it relates to legislation. Because of the census being performed last year, right? That has impacted two major things that should be on all of our radar. One of those was housing element, which you guys know we talk about pretty frequently. But the other piece that really that kind of touches on is redistricting, right? Local redistricting. So we know, as an example, that a lot of the assembly lines have been rewritten, the local lines have been rewritten. It changes what cities are controlled by which assembly seat. So as an example, assembly seat 58 was redone. It is now, I believe, assembly seat 64. So it was renumbered, right? But our current assemblywoman, Cristina Garcia, if she had retained that she was going to run that position, she would have been running from an assembly member that is actually in Long Beach, that was not part of this assembly district before. Now that it has been extended, you have new candidates that are entering the race. With that being said, she's actually decided not to run for that seat. She's running for Congress, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure she's going to be running for Congress. And then we have a new candidate, our city mayor, that is just announced has announced her candidacy to run for that seat, who will now be running for the seat against a assemblyman from down on the other side. So it's going to be really interesting because this does impact some of these lines, right? These lines being changing, the districts being changed, right? It impacts sometimes the population. If you have an area that is a little bit more conservative versus a little more liberal, those lines may have changed, right? If you have an assembly member or a Senate member that supports a bill that is CAR is opposed to or CAR is sponsoring, right? Those seats changing affect what candidates win, right? What populations they have, if they're going to stay in their potential seats or not. So it's important to kind of watch, right? With that being said, we know some of the things we've been talking about just nationally. We've talked about appreciation. I'm not going to go into this too much. We just know, again, there's been a lot of underbuilding. Our forbearances, we've seen slight increases. This isn't super huge, right? That's not super huge for us to warrant that there's going to be 1 million foreclosures. It's not going to be that high. And then statewide, the 3 bills that we've been watching, Senate Bill 8, Senate Bill 9, and Senate Bill 10. I'm not going to go too much into this today. I wanted to spend a little bit more time on the other bills, and I know we're coming up on time, my friends, but this will be available if you want to download this. You have access to all of this as well. And then, of course, we want to kind of continue to monitor the continued risk that we have, namely what is happening in Russia and the Ukraine right now is absolutely having an effect on inflation in our local markets. We also know the Federal Reserve has been set to raise rates and has gotten a bit aggressive. We saw those rates hit 5%. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. With your clients, my friends, please, please, please go and talk to your lenders. Revisit the conversation with your lenders, with anybody whose pre-approval is not brand new, right? Because it may have changed. And what you don't want is a client that is so excited about moving forward, and all of a sudden you open escrow and the rate changed and they're priced out of that particular property. So please make sure you're monitoring this as well. And of course, what are our opportunities and markets of the moment right now? Database, database, database. You will hear me say it until I'm blue in the face. We know that the top 3 places that over 70% of people find their real estate agent is sphere of influence and referrals, past clients, and agent-to-agent referrals. Over 70% of people surveyed by NAR said that those 3 things are how they find their agent. Then we look past that and we say, okay, what are the markets of the moment, right? What are the markets of the moment? So we know there's a ton of different ways to lead generate. What we are looking for is, what is the person that is closer to decision-making point? Affidavit of death before somebody gets to the probate process. We just had 2 agents that came to me this past week that met somebody that's at this point. Divorces, they might not want to sell, usually they need to sell. Absentee owners, especially in dealing with something like the new assembly bill that just got written into policy this past week, right? Absentee owners that are saying, oh my gosh, I've been waiting to evict and I can't evict. I don't want to deal with the headache anymore. Or, hey, I'm not getting this mortgage, this relief from if their tenants did not apply for the COVID relief, right? There's absentee owners that don't want to deal with the headache anymore. Notice of default and trustee sale expires. And then we've been talking about the new grads, right? We talk about new grads before we get to grad season. Please talk to Downey Capital about how they can help you to target new grads that can use their school history instead of job history, and their job offer instead of their income check stubs, in order to potentially qualify. Remember, your message must match the market and the motivation. You don't want to market to everybody the same way, right? You want to talk specifically to them. So with that, these are some of the opportunities that we have. A couple of announcements. You guys know I shared this last week. KW's partnership with Earnest, because we're seeing so much check and wire fraud, right? This is available in the marketplace for you. We're continuing with the KW 6-Figure Plus Club on Thursday nights. I know a lot of you have been attending. I hear live with the instructors. I know we have Diana teaching a couple of sessions. Jennifer Amelon is going to be teaching a session. We've got Pavan coming up as well. If you need to get signed up, make sure to sign up on Eventbrite or talk to Jose at the front. And of course, we're going to continue with our using podcasts for lead generation. And please make sure, if you are interested in launching, join the WhatsApp mastermind group. We're going to be using that to announce the next class for equipment training based on what the requests are. It will not be this Friday. Right? It will not be this Friday. Last but not least, remember, April is Fair Housing Month, right? So if you know, we've talked about the Agent of Distinction certification. This is a great month to become a KW Diversity certified, right? With the modules for Agent of Distinction. We know the prerequisites are the color, real estate, and unconscious bias. You will see both of those on our calendar for the month of April. And should you want to take the additional classes, right, we have this is all available at kwagentofdistinction.com. With that, I know that was a lot of announcements. A couple other pieces. There's going to be CoStar is going to be coming in later this month. We're finalizing the date, but I believe it's going to be next Friday. We will be sending that out. So if commercial is an area of interest for you, please, please, please come see us. Also, if you are interested in any of the segments, commercial, luxury, etc., please remember they each have their own class calendar and additional courses, masterminds, etc. Please talk to us if you need access to the specific calendar, but are not a member of that segment, so that we can get that access to you. With that, I hope you guys all have an absolutely phenomenal rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Monica.
Absolutely, my friend.